My name is Yun Shen, the only imperial princess of the Penglai Phoenix clan. My father is Xuanqing, the greatest beauty of the Phoenix clan. My mother is the supreme ruler of Penglai. But the moment I cracked out of my shell, the 4 seas and 8 desolations went quiet. I was no phoenix. I was just a pitch black, scrawny little chicken with only 2 stray feathers. First came the ecstatic cries of the delivery fairy. It is born. It is born. Congratulations, Your Majesty. It is a little phoenix. Your Majesty, a little princess. It is a chicken. I squawked at the top of my lungs a couple of times, cursing the king of hell and 18 generations of his ancestors. What is this mess? My parents are the most noble of phoenixes, so how did they end up with a chick like me? My mother, however, didn't mind a bit. She held me close, stroking me over and over, facing the stunned courtiers, and defended my honor with perfect confidence. My daughter isn't a chicken. This is a super evolution. My father stood by, staring at my pathetic patches of fuzz, his handsome face full of worry. It wasn't that he disliked me, but he was worried I'd never be able to marry a phoenix princess who is a chicken. News of it spread with wings of its own, sweeping across the 4 seas and 8 desolations in days. It became the biggest sensation in the 3 realms for hundreds of thousands of years. On the day of my 100-day celebration, my mother held me and hosted a 100-table banquet at the Penglai Palace. Whenever she saw a high immortal or deity, she'd shove me into their face. Look, isn't my daughter cute? The Dragon King was cornered by my mother in the corridor, taking a glance at my pitch black little body, forced to go against his conscience to squeeze out 2 words. Cute. My mother was relentless. Really? Really? My mother's expression darkened instantly. She gave a cold snort, then smile, giving me that deadpan face. Are you trying to scare my baby? The Dragon King had no choice. He pulled at the corners of his mouth, forcing a smile that looked worse than crying. I cackled in my mother's arms, thinking to myself how cool it was that my mother was so fiercely protective. My father was more pragmatic than my mother. At the 100-day feast, he started scouting for a betrothed for me. He called it parents who love their children, plan for their long-term future. After looking around, he set his sights on Tianhao, the young master of the Qilin clan who had come to the feast alone. The Qilin emperor had been deeply in love with my mother, but my father had swooped in and snatched her away years ago. He hated him so much, he hadn't stepped foot on Penglai in over a decade. This actually gave my father the perfect opportunity. My father pulled Tianhao over, pointed at me and said, Tianhao, look at how well behaved your little sister is. How about you marry her when you grow up? Tianhao was less than 100 years old. He blinked his round eyes as he looked at me, but she doesn't seem very pretty. That remark nearly made my father explode with rage, but he had to suppress his temper and coax him gently. Do you think your uncle is good looking? Do you think your aunt is good looking? Tianhao nodded. Yes, you are. Then that settles it. She was born to us, so she will definitely be a great beauty one day. The naive little Qilin was just like that, swindled by my wily old father. He muddled his way into a marriage contract with me and stamped the marriage seal. Later, when the Qilin emperor came out of seclusion and heard about this, he grabbed his weapon and stormed onto Penglai. Xuanqing, you old bird-brained fool. You stole the love of my life back then, and now you're scheming against my son. I won't let you get away with this. The only imperial princess of my Phoenix clan is more than good enough to be your son's match. Just as the Qilin emperor was about to fly into a rage, he turned and saw my mother holding me. His fire vanished in an instant, and his voice softened by 8 octaves. My mother kissed me and said, I know you all look down on my daughter because her true form is a chicken. But what do you know? This is a super evolution. Her future potential is something you can't even imagine. I nestled in my mother's arms, nodding silently in my heart. Mother, you truly understand evolution. It is just that no one believed her at the time. As time flew by, a few thousand years passed. I went from a little black chick into a graceful, grown-up chicken. Oh no. After taking human form, I became a delicate and pretty girl. Except, I didn't have a shred of phoenix aura about me. Instead, I carried a bit of a chick's simple-mindedness. Tianhao had grown up too, becoming a dashing young prince of the Qilin clan. But the romanticism he inherited from the Qilin emperor didn't rub off on me at all. He had taken a fancy to my cousin, Yunfu. Yunfu was the daughter of my father's niece, a true-blooded phoenix. In human form, she was breathtakingly beautiful, with feathers that shimmered in brilliant colors. Yet her status in Penglai was far inferior to mine. This simple chicken. She had been jealous of me since we were young, thinking I'd just been born into good fortune, and questioning why I occupied the position of princess, stealing her spotlight. She felt even the engagement to the Qilin prince should have been hers. Growing up, she was always trying to take my things and targeting me in ways both open and hidden. My mother doted on me and wouldn't indulge her bad habits at all. She sent her directly to the high god Lin's for closed-door training. High God Lin's was one of the most powerful deities in all the realms, and even her parents didn't dare utter a single word of protest. She was locked away for 1,000 years. 1,000 years later, Yunfu used the excuse of offering birthday wishes to my mother to return to Penglai. As soon as she returned, she did something earth-shattering. The day before the birthday banquet, Tianhao held Yunfu's hand and knelt before my parents, his head bowed low. Lady Empress, sire, Tianhao has given his heart to Yunfu. There is no longer any room for Yun Shen. I wish to dissolve my engagement to Yun Shen. I will bear all the consequences. I only ask for the lady's blessing. Brother Tianhao, this is all my fault. Please don't do this. Yunfu is not worth you offending the Phoenix clan. Tianhao gripped her hand tightly, his expression resolute. You are worth it. As long as I can be with you, I fear no god. My father watched the couple below, his handsome features twisted in anger. His knuckles cracked as he clenched his fists, longing to beat Tianhao right there and then. My mother, however, was calm. She picked up her teacup and took a sip, then turned to ask me, Shen, what do you say? I was sitting to the side, cracking melon seeds. I've always thought of Tianhao as a friend, since Yunfu likes him. Then let her have him. Once these words were out, Tianhao was stunned. He probably expected me to cry, make a scene, and beg him to stay. Yunfu's face also twisted in anger instantly. The person she had schemed so hard to snatch away, I didn't care about at all. This was harder for her to take than a slap to the face. My mother looked at Tianhao. You want to call off the engagement? Do your parents know? My parents are in seclusion. They do not know. But I can make my own decisions regarding my marriage. My mother didn't make things difficult for him. The engagement between you and Shen was something we elders foisted upon you first. If you want to end it, you may. But let us part on good terms and have no further dealings. Tianhao looked a bit guilty. He snuck a glance at me. My sister is quite sweet. It wasn't exactly a deception back then. Yunfu's face darkened. She started acting again. She pushed Tianhao aside and prepared to kowtow to me. It is all my fault. I am the one who drove you apart. Sister Yun Shen, you can scold me or blame me as you wish. Just please, don't hate Brother Tianhao. The two of them stood there in the hall, holding hands and looking at each other tearfully. They put on a show of deep, undying love. My mother's patience ran out. She decided to cut the knot quickly. This matter concerns the dignity of both the Phoenix and Qilin clans. Do not speak of this to anyone yet. Wait until the Qilin Emperor emerges from seclusion. Our two clans will discuss a formal arrangement and cancel the engagement in a dignified manner. Fine, I agree. Tianhao agreed readily. He probably hadn't expected the breakup to go so smoothly, but no one expected that. A mere day later, the news that the Qilin clan's young lord had broken off his engagement to the princess of Penglai and was seeking to marry Yunfu of the Phoenix clan would spread across the entire world. Ever since the demon clan was sealed away, the three realms hadn't seen any real excitement in hundreds of thousands of years. My situation instantly became the hottest topic in the three realms. Even Fendai, the daughter of my mother's head maid, came over to naively remind me, young princess, actually, it hasn't been hundreds of thousands of years. I heard my mother say that when you were born 5,000 years ago, that was also a shocking piece of news that rocked the world. Thanks a lot. I had almost forgotten until you brought it up. She really knew how to poke at a sore spot. Bloodlines are truly a strange thing. Overnight, I became the talk of the entire world, a laughingstock in the circle of the divine elite. Some said I was just a common pheasant, unworthy of the Qilin young lord, and that being dumped was what I deserved. Others said I was incompetent, unable to even keep hold of my own fiancé. And some even said, how could the Phoenix clan produce such a useless thing? Maybe Yunfu should be the imperial princess instead. My parents were furious. They closed off the gates of Penglai first. Anyone caught gossiping was sentenced to guard the southern heaven gate. This situation even stirred up the Qilin clan. The Qilin emperor was forced to come out of seclusion early. Upon learning of the foolish stunt his son pulled, he strung Tianhao up and gave him a beating on the spot. He also had him placed under house arrest in the Qilin palace, forbidding him from seeing Yunfu. Just as everyone thought the matter might settle down for a while, Yunfu dropped an even bigger bombshell. I'm pregnant with Tianhao's child. That did it. Yunfu's parents wouldn't stand for it. They kept running to the Qilin clan to stir up trouble. The Qilin clan must give our daughter an explanation. Let her marry into the family. The gossip throughout the three realms only grew uglier. Too tired to entangle myself with them any further, I packed a few things and ran off to Qingqiu to find my best friend, Xiyin. Xiyin is a princess of the nine-tailed fox clan of Qingqiu, renowned across the three realms for her beauty and fiery temper. The moment she saw me, she grabbed her foxtail whip, ready to go kick some butt. You little chicken, do you think running away will stop the gossip? Let's go. I'm heading to the Qilin clan and Penglai. I'm going to deal with those gossiping tongues and that pair of lovebirds too. I held her back with a miserable look on my face. Little chicken is really not a very nice nickname. Xiyin glanced at me and sneered. You are not a chicken. I hung my head low. Yes. You're not a courier. A little bit, but not much. They beat your face until it was swollen, and you can still laugh. I shrugged, saying nothing. In truth, My friendship with Xian also began because of Yunfu. A few thousand years ago, Penglai presented a supreme treasure of heaven and earth, attracting countless immortals to come and witness it. Xian had come along with her elders from Qingzhou to join the festivities. The elders were all gathered around the treasure to study it. Studying it, paying no mind to us younger ones. As the imperial princess of Penglai, I naturally had to shoulder the responsibility of hosting. I was busy running around, entertaining all the immortal guests. But Yunfu claimed to be ill. She wouldn't even step out of her own palace. It wasn't long before malicious gossip began to spread, saying that I was jealous of Yunfu's beauty and talent, and that I had intentionally locked her away to keep her from seeing guests, even bullying her. This rumor was absurd to the extreme, yet there were people who actually believed it. Many immortal friends stood up for Yunfu, and Xian was the most intense of them all. She came straight to me, and without a second word, challenged me to a duel, accusing me of using my status as imperial princess to pick on others. I tried to explain myself to her, but she wouldn't listen at all. Red-eyed with rage, she accidentally fell into the Penglai Mystic Realm. The Penglai Mystic Realm is the most terrifying and mysterious place on Penglai Island. It is fraught with extreme danger. Let alone her, a fox from Qingzhou, even a high god, might not make it out alive. In my panic, I didn't even think and jumped in after her. At that time, my cultivation was still quite shallow, and going in felt like a one-way trip to death. But strangely enough, I walked all the way through the realm and somehow remained completely unharmed, not even encountering a single danger. I walked smoothly into the depths of the realm. And then I saw a man, chained up by 9 heaven profound iron. Those iron chains were embedded deep into his flesh, deep enough to see the bone. He was covered in snow, his complexion deathly pale, yet that face was born more handsome than even my father's. Upon hearing my footsteps, he lifted his eyelids and gave me a nonchalant glance, but that one glance made him freeze in place. I've finally waited for you. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately concluded, this big shot is nothing to mess with. Run! But no sooner had I turned around than a powerful force yanked me back. Those seemingly indestructible 9 heaven profound iron chains were like rotting wood before him. They all snapped apart. In an instant, he flew before me. Little chicken, what are you running for? Little chicken. I took a deep breath, staring at the broken iron on the ground. Speechless. These 9 heaven profound iron chains couldn't hold you. In all the 4 seas and 8 desolations, there isn't anything that can hold me unless I choose to let it. So he was locked up here by choice. Who locked you up here? You did. I was stunned. Me. I have that kind of power. He was amused by me, his gaze shifting, soul stirring and captivating. Little chicken, you've changed so much. You've even become humorous. Dazzled by his beauty, I lowered my head and whispered, you must have mistaken me for someone else. I am the imperial princess of the Penglai Phoenix tribe. My name is Yun Shen. He reached out and ruffled my hair, his fingertips cool to the touch, and still stubbornly called me little chicken. I am Chong Hua. This was the first time he told me his name. Chong Hua. It sounds lovely, just like the man himself, possessing a hint of cold detachment and a touch of enchantment. Under Chong Hua's guidance, I soon found Xian. She was lying on a stone platform in the secret realm, her aura extremely weak. With only a single breath left, the wounds on her body were shocking. Chong Hua pulled a bright red fruit from somewhere and tossed it to me. I caught the fruit and studied it for a long time. I had never seen one before. The origin of this fruit was unknown, and I didn't dare to feed it to Xian easily. He saw right through my thoughts and let out a scoff. What? Afraid I'd poison her? Look at her yourself. She is already on the brink of death. Do I really need to go through all that trouble? What he said made sense. I felt relieved, broke the fruit into 2 halves, and carefully fed it to Xian. The fruit melted as soon as it touched her lips, and a warm surge of energy instantly flowed into her body. Not long after, her wounds healed completely, and even her complexion grew much more radiant. I rested my chin on my hands, watching over Xian, utterly baffled. How did she end up so badly hurt? My parents always said the Penglai secret realm was perfectly safe. Why was I completely fine? Chong Hua lay on a nearby tree trunk, eyes closed as if dozing. Because you're just a little chick. He kept calling me little chick, so naturally and so intimately. Instead of feeling angry, I actually found it quite endearing. I must have truly lost my mind. Xian's wounds were completely healed, though she hadn't regained consciousness yet. I decided to take her out of the realm first. Before leaving, I turned back to ask Chong Hua, are you staying here? He opened his eyes, his dark gaze steady, staring at me for a long time. His look was profound, as if hiding endless emotions. I felt a bit awkward under his gaze. Little chick, are you reluctant to leave me? Forget it, you should just stay here. He let out a playful laugh. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. He burst into loud laughter. His laughter was hearty. Once he stopped, he explained earnestly, I made a promise to someone that I cannot leave this place. I didn't press him further. I took Si-yin and left the secret realm. After we emerged from the realm, Si-yin woke up. Upon learning what had happened, she was filled with guilt towards me. I'm sorry, Yun Shen. It is all my fault for being careless. That woman Yunfu is truly vicious. When my parents learned of Yunfu's actions, they were furious. Yunfu dared to do such a thing. This is outrageous. Send her to High God Lin's for strict supervision. She is never to return to Penglai. With her scheme exposed, Yunfu refused to repent. Instead, she threw a tantrum. I am the true phoenix, born with incredible talent. Yun Shen is just a scrubby little chicken. Why does she get to be the imperial princess? Why does everyone protect her? Because I am her mother. She is the only imperial princess of our Penglai Phoenix clan. That is enough. Indeed, in Penglai, my mother's word is law. If she says I am the imperial princess, then I am. No one can dispute that. The night Yunfu was sent away, she snuck in to find me. Yun Shen, don't get too smug. You just happened to be born into a good life. Just you wait. I will definitely take everything from you. Your man, your status, everything you have. I will take it all away. What is mine, you cannot take. What is not mine, I will not keep. I looked at her. It was then that I knew. Tianhao was never meant for me. Looking back now, it has proven to be true. I hid away in Qingqiu for a few days. Mother's birthday banquet was approaching. I couldn't hide forever. I had no choice but to pack and return to Penglai. As soon as I arrived, my parents cornered me in the shop. Behind them floated a dozen portraits of handsome men. My father pushed the portraits right in front of me. Shen, I will find you a husband 10,000 times better than Tianhao, and make that boy regret it for the rest of his life. The portraits slowly unfurled in the air. My mother watched me with eager, hopeful eyes, waiting for my answer. Father, mother, you don't need to protect me like this. They mock me as a barnyard chicken. They laugh at me for having my engagement broken and for being unwanted. It doesn't matter. I am not that fragile. Upon hearing this, my mother's lovely eyes instantly welled up with tears. My child was born unique. What is wrong with that? Why should they be allowed to trample all over you? My father gently wiped the tears from her face and said to me softly, Shen, in this world, those who are different always have a harder path to walk. That is why your mother wants to protect you so much. She doesn't want you to suffer even the slightest grievance. He paused, then added, but Shen has grown up now. It is time for us to let go. Whatever path you choose to take from here on is entirely up to you. Listening to my parents' words, my nose tingled with emotion and my eyes grew red. I figured the Lord of Heaven had done at least one good deed. Although he caused me to be reincarnated as a chicken, he gave me such wonderful parents. It's all been worth it. The Qilin Emperor personally came to apologize. It is all because I failed to discipline my son properly. To let that reckless boy, Tianhao, do such a disgraceful thing and offend the imperial princess? I am here to offer my deepest apologies to you both. My mother was still holding a grudge, but because I was present, she didn't want to ruin the ties between our two clans. Enough. That is enough. Don't pull such a long face. The sky isn't falling. Let's not let this minor matter ruin tens of thousands of years of friendship. Yes, the clan lord is right. These humble gifts, I hope the imperial princess will kindly accept them. Consider it a gesture of apology. My mother's birthday banquet was held as scheduled in the Penglai Immortal Palace. Immortal friends from across the 4 seas and 8 desolations all came. Tianhao also brought Yunfu with him. Yunfu's belly was already slightly rounded. She leaned into Tianhao's arms, smiling with such tender affection, as if she were the happiest person in the world. I heard the Qilin clan and Yunfu's parents have already settled on a wedding date. After the birthday banquet is over, they are going to hold their wedding. Si-yin stood beside me, glancing at them with disdain. Yunfu has never been one to accept defeat in her life. She comes from a lower status and background than you, yet now that she's sat in the seat of the Qilin young mistress, I'm afraid her ego has soared to the heavens. I stuffed a grape into his mouth. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Just eat the grape. Si-yin glared at me, frustrated that I wasn't fighting back. You silly chicken. Tianhao, noticing my expression, was a bit unnatural, hesitated for a long time before finally walking over. Shan, can we still be friends? Si-yin immediately stepped in front of me. Friends? No, but you're welcome to dream. Haha. I couldn't help but laugh at Si-yin's remark. Tianhao's expression turned even grimmer. He stood there awkwardly for a long while. Standing there sheepishly for a long while, he finally turned and walked back to Yunfu's side. Halfway through the birthday banquet, an unexpected incident occurred. Yunfu suddenly broke free from Tianhao's hand, ran up to me, and fell to her knees with a thud. Sister, all the faults are yours alone. You can beat me or scold me, but please, don't be angry with Brother Tan. Please, forgive us. Her sudden, unexpected stun left me completely bewildered. Si-yin was also stunned and didn't react in time. When Tianhao saw this, he was heartbroken. It is not your fault. It is mine. It is not wrong for us to love each other. Get up quickly. Don't hurt yourself or the baby. Yunfu adamantly refused to get up. If sister doesn't forgive me, I will never get up for as long as I live. We were already the center of gossip at this banquet, and now with such a huge scene, we instantly drew everyone's attention. The guests gathered around, whispering to each other. Yunfu's parents suddenly popped out from somewhere. My daughter, my precious daughter. Why is your life so miserable? It is all because your father is useless, letting you be bullied by a chicken since you were small. And now you even have to beg for mercy when apologizing. As soon as those words were spoken, the surrounding immortals instantly erupted in a frenzy. Rumors and gossip flooded in like a rising tide. I'd long heard that the Phoenix Princess was arrogant and overbearing, but seeing it today, it is truly well deserved. Miss Yunfu has already knelt to apologize, yet she is still being so aggressive. Forcing a pregnant woman to grovel like that is simply too excessive. The lady and her consort are both expecting children. This whole affair must have some hidden secret. Could it be a case of swapping the true heir for a fake? Perhaps Miss Yunfu is the real Phoenix Princess. Doesn't that mean that chicken has been occupying another's position for decades? Those words pierced my heart like needles. I clearly didn't do anything, yet I've become the wicked villain in their eyes. Xian was so angry, she was trembling. What do you know? That's not what happened at all. Yunfu knelt down on her own. It has nothing to do with Shen. Shen, stop spouting such nonsense. But her voice was drowned out by the gossip of the crowd. No one would listen to her explanation. My parents rushed over, their faces livid. What is the meaning of this? All of you, get up now. This is the birthday banquet at Penglai, not a place for you to be acting out. Yunfu leaned against Tianhao, sobbing as if her heart were breaking. If my sister won't forgive me, my heart will remain uneasy. I will not get up. With these words, she was clearly setting me up to be burned. If I refuse to forgive her, it makes me the petty one. If I do forgive her, it confirms her claims that I've been bullying her. My mother's expression turned icy in an instant. The celestial aura surged around her, clearly moved to genuine rage. I stepped forward, gently, taking my mother's hand, and spoke slowly. My voice was not loud, yet it reached everyone's ears clearly. I have never truly understood where your hatred for me stems from. The noisy chatter gradually died down. All eyes were fixed upon me. The hall became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. In the beginning, I was the only child of the Phoenix clan. 300 years later, you were born. Your feathers were radiant and shimmering, simply beautiful. They were a stark contrast to a dark little chicken like me. At that time, I was so happy. I took my mother's hand and said, "My sister is the cutest child in the world. I always gave you the very best of my things. If you liked my jade pendant, I gave it to you. You like my immortal residence, I'll give it to you. Whatever you wanted, as long as I had it, I gave it all to you. Yet, you never appreciated it. You thought I was pitying you or showing off my status as an imperial princess. You said I was useless, and that I just had a head start by being born into the right family. I acknowledge that. I truly lack talent, and am just an ordinary chick. But I never wanted to fight you for anything, nor have I ever tried to hold you back. I told you before, what is mine, you cannot snatch away, and what isn't mine, I will not keep. I have never had romantic feelings for Tianhao. That you two are together. I have never blamed you for it, so how could there be a need for forgiveness? Things have reached this point, and I believe keeping our distance is best for both of us. This isn't out of spite. It is about knowing our boundaries. Yunmei, you don't need to envy me, nor do you need to hate me. You are a true phoenix, gifted with extraordinary talent, loved by all. While I was born a mere chicken, plagued by criticism, you are far better than me, so just be yourself. Do not let jealousy cloud your heart. As I spoke, my eyes grew red. The grievances of all these years came flooding out at this moment, seeing my eyes well up. My mother's heart overflowed with heartache. She reached out to embrace me, but I gently pushed her away. The guests present wore various expressions. Some looked ashamed, others looked surprised, clearly not having expected the truth to be this way. Just then, a clear and familiar voice suddenly rang out at the palace entrance, carrying a hint of indulgence and a touch of heartbreak. I actually think you are much better than her. Everyone followed the sound, turning their heads to look, and then bowed in unison. I stood frozen in place, watching the man walking toward me against the light, my heart skipping a beat. It was Chong Hua. The man who had been locked away in the Penglai Secret Realm was actually the crown prince of the 9 heavens. Hadn't he promised others he couldn't leave the realm? How did he manage to get out? Chong Hua walked up to me step by step. He appeared to be a different person from the one in the realm. In the realm, he was gloomy and languid, with a fragile kind of charm, but now, in his white brocade robes, he looked noble and cold, exuding the aura of an emperor. Yet the eyes looking at me were filled with nothing but tenderness. He studied me closely, and seeing my red, puffy eyes, he couldn't help but knit his brows, his voice brimming with heartache. "Little chicken, how did you end up in such a miserable state?" It was that same familiar form of address. Little chicken, in that instant, all my strength and pretense collapsed at those 2 words. The tears I had held back for so long could no longer be contained, rushing from my eyes like a dam breaking, and I sobbed my heart out. Chong Hua panicked. He scrambled to wipe my tears away, but the more he wiped, the harder I cried. His voice grew anxious. Don't cry. Please don't cry anymore, okay? What is wrong with being a chicken? Chickens are cute, too. I just like little chicken. His words left all the immortals present stunned. The crown prince of the 9 heavens actually said he liked a chicken, but I didn't care. I just buried myself in his arms and sobbed, letting out all the grievances of these past years, all the sorrow and pain I had been holding in. After crying for a long time, I finally heard Chong Hua's gentle voice whisper in my ear, filled with absolute sincerity. Little chick, let me marry you. Would you like that? These words struck like a thunderbolt inside the hall. The immortals were instantly in an uproar, dumbfounded, unable to believe their own ears. I was startled by his words as well, staring at him blankly, forgetting to cry. With tears still hanging on my face, looking disheveled and pitiful, Chong Hua chuckled lightly, hooked his index finger, and gently brushed my nose, saying again earnestly, "Little chick, I will marry you." My mother was the first to react, radiant with joy. The dark clouds on her face vanished, yet she still cautiously reminded him, "Your Highness, a marriage is a matter that concerns both our realms, so you must not." Chong Hua turned around, bowing respectfully to my mother, his tone solemn. "Lady, I am Chong Hua, Crown Prince of the 9 heavens, and today I come to ask for the hand of Yun Shen, Imperial Princess of the Penglai Phoenix clan. My devotion shall be constant throughout this life. I pray for your blessing, lady." As soon as he finished speaking, a pair of celestial maidens walked into the hall, carrying treasures of every kind into the room, instantly filling the spacious banquet hall to the brim. There were ancient artifacts, millennia, old celestial herbs, and pearls from the deep sea, all of them rare treasures of the world. The immortals were once again in an uproar. This was no mere marriage proposal. It was as if he had brought the entire treasure vault of the 9 heavens to Penglai. I looked around in a daze, finding Tianhao's face full of desolation and regret. Yunfu's face was filled with resentment and bitterness. Siyin's face was filled with joy and excitement, and my parents' faces were filled with gratification and delight. My mother walked over to me, took my hand, and asked softly, "What do you think?" I felt as if I were in a dream. Everything felt so surreal. A crown prince of the 9 heavens. Why would he want to marry a chicken like me? My mind was in a complete tangle, and I murmured, "I don't know. It seems possible, but it also seems too fast." Chong Hua walked up to me, leaned down to look at me, with deep eyes, filled with tenderness. "It doesn't matter. I can wait. I will wait until you are willing to marry me." Since then, Chong Hua became a frequent visitor to Penglai. He came almost every single day. Rare treasures and divine artifacts flowed into Penglai like water. He spoiled me into becoming the happiest person in all the realms. Before long, there was fresh gossip throughout the realms. The crown prince of the 9 heavens is deeply in love with Princess Yun Shen of Penglai, but his love is unrequited, yet he is still willing to go through fire and water for her and give her everything he has. Vendai would run over every day to tell me different versions of the rumors. Finally, she would proudly conclude, "Little Highness, you are truly the most famous person in all the realms. You have managed to hog all the latest news for yourself." I looked at her, speechless. Is that really something to be proud of? Days turned into weeks, and Chong Hua's gentleness and persistence gradually melted all the concerns in my heart. I slowly opened my heart and accepted him. Finally, on a starry night, I accepted Chong Hua's proposal. Chong Hua was overjoyed. He swung me around in a circle, like a child who had just been given a piece of candy. He immediately asked me to visit the Heavenly Palace, and took me straight to meet the Heavenly Emperor and Empress. I had originally assumed that the Heavenly Emperor and Empress would look down on me because I am a chicken, or give me a hard time, but I never expected them to treat me with such immense kindness. The Heavenly Emperor held my hand. We chatted for a long while about interesting happenings in Penglai. He even bestowed upon me many precious treasures. The Heavenly Empress, even more so, held my hand and asked after my well-being, just like a real mother would. Like father, like son. The way they treat people is exactly the same. They both shower people with rare and precious treasures. When I was leaving the Heavenly Palace, the Heavenly Empress took my hand, her eyes rimmed with red. "Shen, it is all thanks to you that Chong Hua was able to wake up." She was only halfway through her sentence when the Heavenly Emperor cut her off. The Heavenly Emperor gave her a look. The Heavenly Empress said nothing more. She only patted my hand and told me to take good care of Chong Hua. My heart was full of doubts, but it wasn't the right time to ask. I held it in until we reached Chong Hua's Chiwu Palace. Then I impatiently grabbed his hand. "Chong Hua," the Empress said, "that thanks to me, you were able to wake up. What does that mean?" During the Great War between gods and demons, over 100,000 years ago, I was severely wounded and fell into a deep slumber. I only just woke up recently. He said only this, without explaining why. The Empress said, I was the key. I wanted to continue pressing him, but my attention suddenly shifted. "You said you were wounded over 100,000 years ago. Doesn't that make you hundreds of thousands of years old? Even older than my mom and dad." Chong Hua was amused by my indignation. He reached out and pinched my cheek. He pulled me toward the desk, stared into my eyes and asked, "Little chick, does my age bother you that much?" I blinked my eyes. I nodded, Then I shook my head again. How old are you now? 5,000 years old. I was only 10,000 when I fell into my slumber. So I am only 5,000 years older than you. Hardly old, wouldn't you say? All right then, I suppose that isn't too old. Just then, Fendai's voice drifted in from outside the hall. Little Highness, Your Highness the Crown Prince, there is an invitation for you. I told her to come in. She presented a gold-embossed wedding invitation. I opened it to look. It was a wedding invitation for Tianhao and Yunfu. The ceremony was to be held tomorrow at the Qilin clan. Upon seeing the invitation, Chong Hua reached out to wrap an arm around my waist, his voice gentle. It is all right. I will go with you. I nodded, my heart feeling not a single ripple of emotion. I had long since ceased to feel anything for Tianhao. The next day, Chong Hua and I stepped onto the territory of the Qilin clan together. This was my first time returning here since breaking off our engagement. The Qilin palace was decked out in festive decoration, brimming with joy. Red silken lanterns were hung everywhere. Yet, there was no trace of a groom's joy on Tianhao's face. Instead, it was filled with sorrow. Yunfu's belly had grown much larger, and she was dressed in a bright red wedding gown. Her makeup exquisite, but her face looked terribly haggard, devoid of any smile. When she saw me and Chong Hua walking together, the hatred in her eyes was nearly overflowing. I watched them from afar, my heart as calm as still water. Those past events felt as distant as a memory from a previous lifetime, no longer stirring even the slightest ripple in my heart. The wedding ceremony proceeded as scheduled, bowing to the heavens, then to the elders. But just at the moment of the final bow between the couple, Tianhao, however, did not move. He stood rooted to the spot, staring blankly at me. The wedding guests began to stir, whispering amongst themselves, confused as to what was happening. Yunfu, supporting her belly, closed her eyes for a moment. No one noticed, her hand quietly reaching for the golden hairpin in her hair. In the next second, with lightning speed, she pulled out the hairpin and lunged toward my heart with a vicious strike. Everything happened too quickly, so fast that even Chong Hua couldn't react, so fast that I didn't even have time to dodge. I only felt a chill in my chest as the icy golden hairpin pierced through my body, pinning me to the pillar behind. Fresh blood instantly surged out, staining my clothes red. I slowly collapsed into Chong Hua's arms. A surge of blood rose in my throat, and I spat out a mouthful of warm blood. It splattered onto Chong Hua's white silk robe, striking and horrifying. The Qilin Emperor, Tianhao, and all the other immortals and elders rushed toward me, their faces full of shock and panic. Chong Hua held me as if he had lost his mind. Endless, immortal energy poured from his palms into my body. But even so, it could not stop the rapid fading of my life force. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with tears. He was so choked with sobs, he could barely speak, his voice trembling. Little chicken, don't die. I beg you, don't die. I haven't married you yet. You cannot die. Looking at his tormented face, my heart ached so much, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to raise my hand to wipe away his tears, but I didn't even have the strength to lift my arm. Yunfu lay on the ground, looking at me with a crazed laugh. Her laughter was shrill and jarring. Ha ha ha, Yun Shen. You are finished. I practiced the most extreme sonic arts while pregnant, all for the sake of today. This strike will kill you. You are finished. You colorful little chicken, you're finally going to die. My consciousness began to fade. The sounds around me grew more and more distant. I thought that I was truly going to die this time. I wonder if I will meet that judge of the underworld again. I wonder if he will give me another chance, no matter what. Even if I have to beg and pester him, I must ask him to give me another chance. Because I haven't married Chong Hua yet. I haven't spent a lifetime with him yet. I slowly closed my eyes in Chong Hua's arms. The last thing I saw was his face, streaming with tears. Chong Hua held my body, unwilling to let go for a long time. His body trembled uncontrollably, as if all his strength had been drained away. No one noticed. The sky outside the hall suddenly changed. The once clear sky was instantly covered by dark clouds. Black clouds pressed down from above, and thunder roared within the clouds. Faint flashes of lightning flickered. A deafening crack of thunder struck down violently, heading straight for my body. Without a second thought, Chong Hua shielded me tightly in his arms, taking the blow for me. The thunder landed on his back, and he let out a muffled groan, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Yet, he still held me tightly without letting go. One strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. One bolt of thunder after another continued to strike down. The black and purple lightning roared like a giant dragon, each strike more ferocious than the last. Chong Hua had blocked countless hits for me, his body covered in wounds, blood soaked through his clothes, and he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Yet his arms remained wrapped around me, refusing to loosen his grip even a fraction, until the Heavenly Emperor arrived with his celestial guards. Witnessing the scene before them, they forcibly pulled Chong Hua away. You've lost your mind. This is the life-cleansing thunder tribulation. Have you forgotten what she is? If you truly take this tribulation for her, she will be completely obliterated and never return. The Heavenly Emperor's words were like a sudden awakening. His voice snapped him out of his delusion. Chong Hua came to his senses in an instant. He clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles turning white, watching as the bolts of thunder struck my body. His entire body trembled with fear, yet he dared not take another step forward. He could only watch tears streaming down his face. One strike after another. The 81 strikes of the life cleansing thunder tribulation finally ended. After the thunder stopped, a sky-filling blaze suddenly erupted within the hall. Crimson flames enveloped my body, burning fiercely. The fire was warm, not scorching. Like a mother's embrace, the gathered immortals were stunned, retreating one after another. No one dared to approach. Amidst the soaring flames, my body began to transform. My human form slowly faded away, shifting into a vermilion bird, shining with brilliant, iridescent light. Its wings unfurled, blotting out the sky. A sacred and majestic aura radiated from its entire being. The divine bird let out a piercing cry, a clear, melodic sound that echoed through the heavens. It shook the entire Qilin Palace to its foundations. The ancient divine beast, the vermilion bird, had manifested. As the flames dissipated, I stood in the hall in my human form, dressed in a vermilion gown, with a cold and aloof expression, surrounded by the true fire of the vermilion bird. I was no longer that scrawny little chick. I was the true ancient divine beast, the vermilion bird. Chong Hua looked at me, his eyes filled with surprise and tenderness. He walked quickly toward me. He reached out and held me, his voice choked with emotion. "Little chick, you're back. You've finally returned." Only then did I remember everything from the past. I remembered my past life. The good news is, from now on, no one will ever dare look down on me again. I am the ancient divine beast, the vermilion bird, of noble standing, far above the phoenixes and the Qilin. The bad news is, it turns out I am even older than Chong Hua, hundreds of thousands of years ago. I was the ancient divine vermilion bird and the god of war of the three realms, and Chong Hua was my apprentice. He had been by my side since he was young, calling me master, but he never addressed me properly. He would always call me little chick, calling it out so affectionately and naturally. I was only 20,000 years older than Chong Hua, so I couldn't really keep this lawless apprentice in check. I could only let him call me that. Later, when he grew up and became the most outstanding crown prince of the 9 heavens, he suddenly confessed to me, saying that he loved me and that he wanted to take me as his wife. He even said he was willing to wait for me to consider it, willing to wait no matter how long it took. I was deeply startled by his confession, my heart in a tangled mess, and I could only choose to run away. Not long after I began avoiding him, the demon realm invaded, throwing the 3 realms into chaos. As the commander-in-chief of the divine demon war, I led Chong Hua to fight against the demon lord and his demonic army. Before heading to the battlefield, Chong Hua found me once more and asked with a firm gaze, "Master, once we win the battle, little chick, will you marry me?" I looked at him and smiled. Let's win first, then talk about it. But I never expected that battle to reach such a tragic end. On the battlefield, the demon lord ambushed me. To save me, Chong Hua took a fatal blow in my place. Demonic energy invaded his body, infinitely amplifying the evil thoughts within him, nearly causing him to fall to the demonic path. I exhausted all my cultivation to strip those evil thoughts from him and suppressed them within the Penglai secret realm, sealing them with 81 chains of 9 heaven black iron, leaving a seal behind. Without my permission, no one could open it, nor could anyone leave because of his severe injuries and the trauma of having the evil thoughts extracted. Chong Hua fell into a long, deep slumber. The heavens placed him in the restricted area of the 9 heavens. Having lost Chong Hua's aid, I fought on alone, eventually giving my all, sealing the demon lord and his army back into the demon realm, defending the 3 realms. But due to my grave wounds, I was utterly spent. My physical body and path to immortality destroyed. A shred of my soul entered the cycle of reincarnation, rebirthing as an ordinary college student in the mortal world. I lived a mundane life for 20 years, before eventually drowning while trying to save a child. Upon returning to the underworld, Yama noticed my soul was abnormal, carrying the essence of an ancient divine beast. He investigated my past, and only then learned I was a vermilion bird. Thus, he made an exception and sent me back to the 4 seas and 8 desolation to be reborn. I became Yun Shen, princess of the Penglai Phoenix clan. My parents were both phoenixes, yet I was born a mere chicken. This was because my vermilion bird soul was still dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And after Chong Hua woke up, learning that I had been reborn as a phoenix princess and that I was still just a chicken, he ignored the heavenly emperor's objections and rushed to the Penglai secret realm to guard the sealed evil thoughts and to guard me, waiting for me to appear. He said he had promised someone he would never leave the realm. That person is me. He recognized me long ago. From the very moment he saw me in the Forbidden Realm, he recognized me, regardless of whether I am a vermilion bird or a chicken. He has always loved me for who I am. Chong Hua didn't even care whether I could awaken or if I could recover the memories of my past life. He only wanted to stay by my side and protect me for a lifetime. Even if I were to remain a chicken forever, he would still be willing to marry me, cherish me, and love me. Unexpectedly, that strike from Yunfu ended up being the catalyst. It allowed me to awaken between life and death. The vermilion bird spirit was reborn through the flames. When Yunfu saw me transform into the vermilion bird, the madness and smugness on her face vanished in an instant. It was replaced by boundless fear and despair. She never could have imagined that the chicken she went to such lengths to destroy was actually the ancient divine beast, The vermilion bird. Chong Hua looked at Yunfu, his eyes filled with cold intent. With a wave of his hand, he subdued Yunfu and had her locked away in the heavenly prison of the 9 heavens. He had intended to end her life right there, to avenge me, but I stopped him. I told him she was merely blinded by her own obsessions and did not deserve to die. Letting her reflect in the prison for the rest of her life was the best punishment for her. I visited Yunfu in the heavenly prison once. She had already lost her former luster. Her hair was disheveled and her face was gaunt. Seeing me, her eyes were still full of hatred. Yun Shen, I never imagined you were the vermilion bird. Are you satisfied now? You won everything. I sighed and looked at her. Yunfu, believe it or not, I have never hated you, and I have never wanted to compete with you for anything. Yunfu smiled, a mirthless smile, laughing in a desolate manner. I refuse to accept this. I am the phoenix, gifted with talent, stunningly beautiful. Why should it be you, a common chicken who became the imperial princess? Why does all the good fortune fall to you? I just wanted to take back what belonged to me. What did I do wrong? He paused for a moment and added with venom. And then there's that wretch Tianhao. He claimed to have fallen for me at first sight, yet kept saying he couldn't break off your engagement, fearing it would damage the bond between our 2 clans. I had no choice but to poison him, to make him mine. Otherwise, how could I force him to call off the wedding? But after he found out about the poison, he turned against me and even blamed me. What right does he have to blame me? I shook my head and turned to leave the dungeon. Even now, he remained obsessed and deluded, never realizing that his defeat was never about status or natural talent, but his own heart. It was that bottomless envy that ruined his life. Yunfu had been dealt a winning hand from the start, born of noble blood, a true, authentic phoenix, breathtakingly beautiful and sharp-witted. Yet, fueled by jealousy, he led himself toward total ruin. It is truly a pity. Everything finally returned to peace. The 3 realms regained their former tranquility. Those who had once mocked me now came to offer their apologies, treating me with the utmost respect. No one dared mention that I was a chicken anymore. My wedding with Chong Hua was held as scheduled in both the 9 heavens and Penglai. The extravagance of the banquet and its sheer scale became the talk of the 4 seas and 8 wildernesses once more, delighted in by all the immortals. On our wedding night, the wedding candles burned bright in the Chiwu Palace on the 9 heavens. Red silk was draped everywhere. The air was filled with an atmosphere of joy. Chong Hua walked to the bedside and gently lifted my red veil. He gazed at me, his eyes deep, overflowing with tenderness and doting. He stared at me, stunned for a long time, unable to speak a word. I cast a sidelong glance at him and asked with a smile, "Are you stupefied?" Chong Hua snapped back to reality, reached out and gently embraced me, his chin resting on my shoulder. He whispered huskily in my ear, "Little chick, do you want little white or little black tonight?" My face turned bright red in an instant, burning hot. Little black was the version of Chong Hua I once sealed in the Penglai Secret Realm, possessing a touch of gloom and enchantment, while Little White was the noble and aloof, gentle and doting Crown Prince Chong Hua. Ever since I was reborn from the fire and awakened my vermilion bird soul, the evil thoughts within Chong Hua had also completely dissipated due to my return. Little Black and Little White merged back into one, becoming the Chong Hua of today. He possesses both the cold, regal aura of an emperor and a charming, gentle demeanor. It's just that ever since he merged, he loves playing shameless tricks to tease me. Flustered and angry, I pushed him away. I want neither. Chong Hua chuckled lowly and held me tightly from behind, his warm breath grazing my ear with a hint of ambiguity. Then shall we let them both out? The wedding candles in the hall were burning bright, casting a glow on the couple, locked in a tender embrace. The night was still long. From this day forward, an ancient vermilion bird, paired with the crown prince of the 9 heavens, no one in all the realms would dare to speak against us. And I am no longer that mocked little chicken, but the little chick cherished in the depths of Chong Hua's heart, the most noble crown princess of the 3 realms. The ancient, mythical vermilion bird